Hey, today on the show we have Keri Spencer. She is a licensed attorney and executive director and founder of R.I.S E. And R.I.S E stands for Restoring Identities After Sexual Exploitation. It's a shelter for girls who are victims of sex trafficking. So this is a very disturbing topic, but one that I feel needs to be brought to the attention of people because I've learned so much about this issue during research. And then I learned even more during the episode while talking to Keri. If you or someone you know is a victim of sex trafficking, please reach out and get help. There are links in the show notes. And just a warning with this episode, a lot of the stuff we talk about is very disturbing, shocking, and it's not a fun topic. But again, it's a very important one to discuss and educate people on. And I hope that we can help some people by putting this out here. Please welcome Keri Spencer to the program. So you are the executive director and founder of R.I.S E, and that's in Oklahoma, correct?
Yes. Okay. We are about 40 minutes east of Tulsa.
Okay. And so just this is kind of a difficult subject to talk about, but I feel like it's one of those things that people need to learn about. And I was very naive about sex trafficking. I thought, oh, that's just something that, it happens in movies and TV shows. Or other countries. That doesn't happen in the US. And now I'm learning so much and how common it is. But let's define what is sex trafficking exactly, because I think people don't even know what that term really means.
Okay. So most people, when you say sex trafficking, immediately their mind and the images they conjure up are going to be quote unquote traditional prostitution. Girl, boy, and man, woman. Sorry about that. On the street, walking up to the car and, hopping in and accepting an offer to exchange money for some sort of sexual activity. That's what most people think of. And yes, sex trafficking does include prostitution. However, sex trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation also encompasses a lot of other things. It can include exotic dancing, pornography, whether that's videos or child pornography or other types of pornography online, like still images, those kinds of things. And then what we see with our kiddos also includes some, we refer to it as survival sex. So what we know is that for kids who run away, who find themselves on the street for whatever reason with no place to stay, no means of supporting themselves, those kinds of things. We know that typically somewhere in the neighborhood of between the first 24 and 72 hours that a child finds themselves on the street, that they're likely to be approached by someone who is going to traffic or exploit them. And if they're not contacted in that short a period of time, they find themselves offering themselves as a way to survive. Hey, I'll do this if you'll get me something to eat. It's really cold out here, or the weather's really bad, or whatever. I'm willing to sleep with you if I can stay on your couch. So as a means of survival, and then under the law, specifically with regard to the language, how the laws read is that sex trafficking is when someone is forced, frauded, or coerced into exchanging sex for something of value if they are over the age of 18. And if they are under the age of 18, if they exchange anything of value for sexual activity, then they are considered to be a victim of trafficking. So again, that's if somebody, trades sex for drugs, trades sex for getting their hair done or something to eat, a place to stay, getting their nails done, money, no matter what, if they are under 18 and they've traded something of value for sexual activity, then that is sex trafficking. If someone is over the age of 18, is a legal adult, then we have to be able to prove force, fraud, or coercion in order to be able to consider them a victim of sex trafficking.
Okay. And then this can happen to anyone But I don't know. I read this on the internet, so you'll have to correct me and tell me if this is right. But it says most of the most vulnerable populations for trafficking in the U.S. include American Indian, Alaskan Native communities, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning individuals, individuals with disabilities,
Mhm.
undocumented migrants, runaway and homeless youth, and temporary guest workers and low income individuals. Is that a majority of the victims?
It is a lot of our victims, and yes, traffickers are extremely adept at pinpointing those vulnerabilities and exploiting them to get their victims to do what they're wanting them to do, which is to engage in this commercial sexual activity. However, that said, even though there are some populations that are more vulnerable to than others, it can happen to anyone. I mean, it can happen to that kid who's from the quote unquote normal family. Um, and, girls cheerleader and everything's rocking and rolling and looking like, she's on the right track and family's got it all together. And even that young lady or that young man can have some vulnerability of some sort that a trafficker hones in on, whether it's, despite what everything looks like on the outside, the self-esteem is really low, or, perhaps the parents aren't, they're unhappy and moving towards divorce, and that's causing some, anxiety or emotional stress that child just simply doesn't know how to cope with, or isn't equipped to navigate that through. And that's a vulnerability that a trafficker might exploit. So really, there is no walk of life that is immune to this, but there are some populations that seem to be more vulnerable and seem to be overrepresented in the field of victims of sex trafficking.
Yeah. So again, the way I found you was from a news story about this girl at the Mavericks game. And I don't think this story got nearly the publicity I thought it was going to get. I thought oh my God, this is a huge national news story. I don't think anybody knows about it. The only reason I found out is because my girlfriend works for Tegna, and I think they had that story because of the station in Texas or Oklahoma or wherever it was. But tell us what you can about that story, because it was a girl. She was at a Mavericks game and she was picked up and like already sex trafficked into hotels and through online ads. And there was multiple people involved. It wasn't just like one guy. It was like 6 or 8 people or something.
Right. And so, to be honest with you, I too didn't know about it until the news story. That's how little coverage it got. Didn't know about it until the local news station here, contacted me and said, "Hey, will you be part of this story? Do you know about this?" I was like, "No." And so even I had to go back and look at their original story to find out what they were talking about. But as I understood it, a young lady with dad having dad and daughter date night at a ball game, and she goes to the bathroom and never gets back. And like lickety split, before you know it, she's been abducted and taken to a different state. And luckily dad was on the ball and making calls and getting law enforcement involved right away, and they were able to find her very quickly. Unfortunately, not before she had experienced the trauma of this. But that story is extremely scary for parents and for all of us. And I think about that young lady and hope that she is getting the services that she needs. I do want your listeners to know, though, that the stranger abduction and taken off, like what happened with that young lady, actually is not as common, again, as movies and TV would like for us to believe. A lot of our victims, again, know they're traffickers because they are in relationships they get into romantic relationships with people that they meet online, and then eventually meet them and believe that this is a legitimate romantic relationship reciprocated from the person they've been talking to. Unfortunately, sometimes folks are trafficked by family members, people who are supposed to be taking care of them. And so while abductions, like what happens with the young lady at the Mavericks game, do happen, it isn't as often as we think.
So
There's usually something
yeah,
else going on.
for sure. So yeah, that's what I wondered, is it because I was talking to my girlfriend about this and we were kind of trying to figure out, had she messaged this guy earlier, or is this was just a random guy grabs her, or how did he get her out of the Mavericks game in broad daylight in public like that?
Yeah, and that information, as far as those details go, I don't have. The way it was presented to me is that it was kind of a random, opportune moment for those folks, in as much as that they were looking for someone that they could do this to, and she happened to be the one. Um, but like I said, a lot of times, in the stories, the girls' stories that we in particular deal with, as we start to flesh out more of the details and they're starting to work through their healing process, and becoming more open to talking and working through the trauma, we find that maybe there is something else that was missed, that maybe she did know somebody and message them or whatever. But this particular young lady, as I understood it, it was a completely random thing that time.
Okay. And you say that it's typically not like Taken with Liam Neeson, or it's also not like Pretty Woman with Julia Roberts. Like those are two very bad examples of what most of the issues that you're dealing with look like.
Right. So, like I said, our girls come from a number of walks of life as well, but they often have been in a relationship with the person who ends up trafficking them. That happens a lot. We refer to that as boyfriending. Somebody, they get into a relationship with an older guy, and build up trust, and it's a fairly long process sometimes, that this individual will groom them, and then once they've groomed them long enough where a young lady trusts them and is in love with them and is willing to do whatever, then they turn them out into the sex trade. We have had young ladies come whose parents have actually been involved in their trafficking, because parents had their own issues, say with substance use and abuse, and didn't have the money to pay for the drugs that they were addicted to. And it was a way to get those drugs, to trade their children in exchange for drugs. And so yeah, then I've had girls who have come, and they've actually been what we refer to as friended, because trafficking victims are often trained to recruit others, and to bring others into the fold of what they're doing. And so I have had that be the case, where they've made friends with somebody in the neighborhood where they live, or again, they have somebody they knew at school that this was happening to, and they recruited them, brought them in, and were groomed again by someone they know that they thought was their friend, and then found themselves in a situation they didn't know how to get out of.
Yeah, it reminds me of like the Jeffrey Epstein, the Ghislaine Maxwell. That's what she did. She recruited these women, and the women trusted her. Well, because she's another woman, and then she reveals the Epstein and all the craziness of that whole situation.
Right. And what happens is and then sometimes folks, one of the ways they'll be groomed is they'll get kids addicted to some sort of a substance that they also can't pay for. And so, well, you're going to have to do something for me somehow or some way, because these drugs aren't free.
That's kind of like what they did in Taken. They got the girls, I can't remember what drug it was, but they hooked them up. I know you say Taken, that's not typically what you see, but is that a real, is that stuff going on like overseas, or maybe not as much in the US, but there is situations like that, right?
Yeah, there are situations like that are going on overseas as well. In the United States, it's we talk about it being hidden in plain sight. particularly with regard to say adolescent girls, which is what R.I.S.E works with.
Mhm.
These kids are going to school, and their trafficking is happening after school in the evenings or on the weekends, especially, like I said, if it has anything to do with if they're being trafficked by a caregiver or family member or someone like that. They're going to keep up appearances of normal as long as they can. So these girls are going to be at school every day, may not be doing well in school because of all that they're experiencing, et cetera, but they're going to be, it's going to look pretty normal, right?
Mhm.
We see a lot of people being brought over from other countries to work at the nail salon or work in the restaurant, work as a nanny, whatever. Oh, you're going to be able to send money home to your family because they're in Cambodia and they're really poor there, or whatever it is, and you're going to be able to send this money over to help them. Then they get here, and their passports and documentation, identification, all that's taken from them and held until they're able to pay back whatever it costs to get them here. But then that goalpost keeps getting moved farther and farther out. And so while they may actually work in the restaurant and actually work in a factory, or actually work as a nanny, actually work in the nail salon, then the sex trafficking gets brought in alongside because, oh, we could make more money and you could make more money to send to your family and to hurry up and pay your debt off to me if you do this too. So there's all of those kinds of situations as well.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask you about that because it said 80% of the trafficking victims are born in the US, but that other 20%. So that's what I was going to ask you about, because I'm in Arizona, and that's a big issue right here with the border. People talk about the border, and that's what I wanted to know. Is there child sex trafficking victims being brought over through the border? Like, that's what I would think is the deal that they make. Hey, we'll get you to America. And then, so that is what's going on, is that they're making those, like, that's a big problem.
Right. For adults. And then we have actually heard stories too of parents in some of these countries where the poverty is just more than anybody in the United States could ever possibly imagine, because we have no idea what it's like to be in poverty here, really.
Mhm.
Right. And so I have heard stories of parents from some of these countries actually willingly, again, selling children to these people, whether it is to be brought into the United States or into another country, because again, because they are actually living in the trash dump. And so they're, in their mind, they're like, well, okay, then at least I'm getting my child out of this, right? And so so it is a problem with people coming in to the United States. They're tricked into doing these things, and like I said, and they don't speak the language, and they don't
Hmm.
understand legal things, and don't know how to get out of it.
So yeah, this is just so awful. And the problem is getting worse. Like, do you have the statistics? I don't know if it was you or somebody I read said that the increase since the pandemic, the online trafficking is up 40%. That's like a shocking statistic to me.
Yeah, with the pandemic, we have seen a lot more of internet and online use. I tell you, I'm actually a lawyer by trade, and
Oh, okay.
when I practiced law, I practiced in juvenile court, and I prosecuted delinquency cases, and I prosecuted foster care cases when the state would remove kids for abuse and neglect. And so I didn't come by what I'm doing naturally. It wasn't my wheelhouse. So it took a lot of training for me to get to a place where I felt like I was comfortable enough to actually go ahead and take the leap and do this. But I went to a training on human trafficking, and one of the speakers there actually set up at the time, because Backpage was still a thing. She set up a surreptitious account of herself, saying that she was a 12-year-old girl, right, or 13 or whatever, offering herself, and then just let it run in the background while she was talking, so that we could watch in real time the responses and the hits that she was getting. And I mean, it just ran like a stock market ticker. in a 1 hour session at a conference of all of the men that were just responding to this ad that she had literally just set up from scratch at the beginning of our session.
Yeah, explain to me this in my audience too, the Backpages thing, because I watched a couple documentaries and they kept mentioning that website. I think I'd heard of it, but I didn't really know what it was. And the way I understand it was that they used to advertise on Craigslist Backpages or something, and then Craigslist got rid of the classified adult escorts or whatever. But now there's this Backpages, and I'm probably on some list because I went on the website because I want to see what is this thing. So I go on there. I mean, it's like hardcore pornography, and it's blatant. It's blatant prostitution. I don't understand how that's legal. Now, none of the ones that I saw were underage, but even still, I mean, it's in Arizona. I don't think it's legal to have adult prostitutes. So how is this stuff legal? How are these sites not shut down?
Well, Backpage actually has had a ton of issues, and I'm not sure. I was under the impression that with all of the legal issues that it actually had been shut down. So I'm not sure how long ago it was that you got on there, what you were seeing.
It was this morning.
Okay. Was new and so there's all of the ins and outs of, well, they're adults and it's online. And so, and even though it may not be legal in Arizona, if they're not in Arizona, then that's how they're getting around prostitution being illegal in Arizona, because this person actually isn't in that state. There's just a lot of ins and outs, and they've got hammered with a lot of fees, fines, court costs, judgments that were levied against them in court cases. And there are supposed to be a lot of safeguards and regulations that are put in place on some of these websites, so that they're supposed to be ensuring that who they're dealing with is an adult, not a minor, but that doesn't happen.
Yeah, that seems like, I guess on the one hand, they should crack down on that. But on the other hand, well, maybe if it's out in the open, that's easier to catch them. Because that seemed like the documentaries I watched, that's what the cops were doing. And then you heard them, they're sending these vulgar texts, and they're catching all the guys though. They're catching them right away. So maybe that's a good thing if you leave it up. I mean, I feel like 1 out of every 3 people on there is probably a cop. Like,
right. And that's, and I know when a lot of the court cases were going on with Backpage and stuff, that the police officers that I would talk to, that was kind of where they had kind of mixed emotions about that. Like, yeah, we really need to shut this down. I need these people to be safe. And then they're like, but man, it's a really good investigative tool for me, because that's how I'm able to get in touch with a lot of these people and make arrests and recover these people and save them from this dangerous world that they're a part of. So it's kind of a double-edged sword on that, because you can see why it needs to be shut down, but then like, hey, if that's our out to get a hold of these people, maybe we need to hang on to it for a little longer, Yeah. With the pandemic and so many people being at home and being online, we have seen an increase, in particular, with the online pornography. And, we're finding that pornography, as if we didn't already know, is just as addictive as substances that people get addicted to. And it does the same changes in the brain chemically that substances do. So that when an individual starts watching pornography, maybe they're watching, softcore porn, whatever the term for it is, or something that you could still see on, Cinemax or HBO. And then just like with a drug, you have to start watching it more often in order to get those same feel good feelings. And then after a while, you have to start watching harder and harder stuff to get that same feeling, and more violent things. And to eventually, the only way that person is going to get those same endorphins and feel good feelings that they have from when they started is to start acting out what they've seen. Just watching isn't enough. Well, and I mean, if you think about it, most of us who, as I would say, normal folks aren't going to do the things that are in pornography. You're not going to ask your girlfriend to do that. She's going to look at you like you're a crazy person.
Probably, yes.
No, dude, not a prude, but I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
Right? And so then where do they go? Well, if they're paying somebody, they don't really get to say, no, dude, I'm not doing that, because they're paying for it, right? And
Yeah.
the thing is that in a lot of these images and a lot of this pornographic stuff that we're seeing, the girls and the guys that are on there are young, sometimes teenagers. And so the demand for people that they're going to pay to look like the people they see on TV is high. And so we have seen an increase in the use of pornography in the pandemic, which then feeds the demand for the actual trafficking.
It seems like there's something wrong with somebody. There should be an innate sense between right and wrong that's kind of built into people that goes, this is not like the fact that people are getting off on hurting people, basically. I mean, I don't think these girls are enjoying this stuff. I mean, they're doing it, but reluctantly. That's where it becomes like gross to me and really sick.
Right. Well, and when you have, unfortunately, we're living in a time where I just truly don't understand. I have two grown daughters, and so as a mom of two girls, I just don't understand a lot of things. So we're living in these crazy times where there's a movement to take pedophilia out of the DSM as a disorder and call it a sexual orientation, and trying to change the terminology like we're doing with everything else, and refer to folks who suffer from this as a minor attracted individual. That's the term for it. You got heterosexual.
The real thing. See, I said stuff like that 5 years ago, that's where society was headed, and people said I was being crazy. But this is that people are making a movement for this, huh?
Yeah, and like I said, and the term they're using is that I'm an MAP, a minor attracted person. No, dude, you're a pedophile. And I'm sorry, you're a criminal, and you can call it what you want, but
yeah,
it's putting lipstick on a pig. It still is what it is. And so I mean, that's the time we're living in, where we have a movement of people who want to say pedophilia isn't wrong, that kids really get enjoyment out of having sex with adults and they're fine with it. And I'm like, listen, I run a house full of girls who've been sexually abused their whole life, and I'm here to tell you, no, they don't. They don't enjoy it. They weren't okay with it, and it does cause problems. So you can dress it up all you want, but it's not okay.
Yeah, no, it's disgusting, and you're hurt. Like I said, you're taking advantage. That's why we have the law that you have to be 18. But so the traffickers we talked about online, but they're trained to recruit kids via school, church, and the internet. And then I heard this statistics: 36% of sex trafficking victims are boys.
Yeah.
And I saw this example. This is really gross. They lured this kid in from video games, like Discord, and there was a bunch of other ones that I'm too old to know what the heck these things are. But they lured this kid in, and he was living in a trailer in a 55 plus older community. And there was 6 men involved in this example. They kept the teenage boy in a trailer for over a year and repeatedly raped him.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just shocking to me that how are the other pedophiles finding each other? And nobody has the good sense to say, hey guys, this is wrong. Or it's so confusing to me that this stuff goes on in broad daylight underneath the watch of all these other people that are living in the community. Nobody knew what was going on.
Well, and again, that's part of, unfortunately, where our society has devolved, not evolved. We don't pay attention, and we don't know each other, like they did when your grandparents and my grandparents were, living in Leave It to Beaver times or whatever, where neighbors knew neighbors and were at each other's houses, and all of our kids played together and all those things. That's what our kids do. Our kids camp out inside and they're on video games. They're not outside playing with the neighborhood kids like I was. And we didn't talk to, and parents don't talk to each other. And so I mean, we're kind of oblivious to anything that's going on in the world, except for me right now in this moment. And when you're not paying attention and when you don't care, these folks can do whatever they want and no one's looking.
Yeah. Well, here's another story. And again, I don't bring this stuff. I don't bring this stuff up to shock people, or maybe I do. I think people need to be aware of this stuff is happening. This was a story in Metro Detroit. I don't know if you heard about this one. 12 kids were rescued in a sex trafficking rings. There was 8 adults and then 46 Johns or whatever you call it, But one of the things that on this one was a undercover police officer, a 3-month-old baby and a 5-year-old girl made a deal to sell for $600 to an undercover police officer. I mean, that's just one of the most disgusting things I've ever heard in my life. Thankfully, it was an undercover police officer and not a real person. But I mean, is that something that's happening? Does it go that young? They're selling babies and 5-year-olds?
Yep. Every day.
Oh my God. I don't even know what to say to that. I don't know why this is not bigger news or more people are not discussing this instead of Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. I mean, this is a way bigger issue and problem that no one is talking about. It's shocking to me. I don't know how to even proceed with this. It's just really disgusting how is this not major headline news?
Right. Well, and I have a PowerPoint that I do when I go to civic organizations or church organizations or whatever to talk about trafficking and talk about R.I.S.E. And one of the slides is just is headlines from our area. So, state senator convicted of sex trafficking, lawyer arrested for child porn, doctor, whatever. Like, people say, this isn't happening here. Who's buying sex? I'm like, let me tell you, it's pastors and lawyers and doctors and police officers and firefighters and teachers and your next door neighbor. It isn't the creepy looking dirty guy that you see on Cops.
Yeah, it could be anybody is what you're saying.
Yeah. Those are the people who are buying sex. And so I'm not one to sugarcoat things, because the girls I work for haven't had it easy. So I'm going to make it clear to people what's going on. And in the United States, we have a child between the ages of 12 and 14 trafficked for sex for the first time every 2.5 minutes. And what is happening is people are paying money to rape our children. Period.
This is so disgusting, but I'm so glad that we're shining a light on this problem, as hard as it is to talk about it. Can you tell me about the connection between foster families and sex trafficking? How common is that?
So what we know is that about 87 to 90% of kids who are trafficked in the United States have been involved with the foster care system at least one time in their life.
Oh, wow. That's a huge percentage.
It is. And that has to do with that vulnerability piece that we talked about before.
Okay.
We've got kids that are coming from a background of dysfunction already, whether it's mom and dad are drug users, or there's sexual abuse or some other form of abuse in their house, something that's happened that's led them to be involved with a DHS, a CPS, and get them in foster care for some period of time. And foster care is not, a perfect system. It is what we have, but it's not great. And so while kids are taken from their families and in foster care for a period of time, and families are doing whatever is required of them to get their kids back, some of those issues really aren't addressed necessarily as head on and as in depth as they need to be. And kids get back home and the issues are still there again, or the kids necessarily weren't given the period of time to work through the traumas that came along with being in foster care. And so they're part of that population of kids that are just more vulnerable. They've been abused already. Their self-esteem is low. They live perhaps in a lower socioeconomic status than other people. They just already have those vulnerabilities built in. Mm-hmm. And like I said, traffickers know, perhaps their parents are, they're doing the best they can, but they're not really well educated. And so they aren't looking as closely to what their kiddos are doing online and social media. They just know, well, all the kids are doing it, so my kid's fine. She hugs and kisses me before she goes to bed every night. And so they're not necessarily paying attention to who they're talking to online.
But that's a good demographic for teachers and counselors and neighbors and parents and family members to kind of keep an extra eye on, because they're more at risk, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What about, explain this connection. This is an interesting thing to me. Branding and tattoos. It sounds like there's a lot of burns, scars, branding, and tattoos, kind of to like the people that, the traffickers kind of do this to mark the girls like they own them. And, I saw a thing where they talked to a tattoo artist who removes them for free or covers them up, which is really cool. He said the markings are getting bigger, and they're getting bigger and bigger, which is really disturbing too.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of rules in the sex trade and on the street, and a lot of things that because gang activity is a big part of trafficking in a lot of instances, and there's just a lot of rules. You don't look pimp in the eye, and if you look or another guy in the eye, because then that person, after you've looked him in the eye, you now belong to him. A lot of things like that. And so yes, the branding that with tattoos, whether it's a symbol or an actual name, is a trafficker putting their mark to show their ownership, so that another pimp can't take this girl or this boy from them. It is, I mean, it literally is just as you say, it is a marking of property. And we have had some girls that have come in with those, and especially for the girls who are in a relationship with this person, somebody they're in love with, they're going to have manipulated them into believing, well, it's just like everybody else, she's got her man's name tattooed on, on her arm. I love you, baby. That's all I'm doing is having you put my name on you, just like everybody else does. But it's the manipulation runs deep.
Okay. So that could be another thing. If people see things like that, that could be a sign.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And one of the things I tell, like teachers, in particular, because, if teachers pay attention, they know their kids, they know the backgrounds they come from for their families. If you've got a kid who's from a family that, just simply, they're not doing as well, maybe as some of your other kids. And suddenly it seems like she's always coming in with nails done. Well, that's not an inexpensive service. She's getting her hair colored every 6 weeks. She's got these name brand clothes, or Michael Kors purse, or whatever the latest, greatest name brand is, whatever. And that's not the family she comes from. You got to start asking questions. Girls, I know when I was in high school, we did it, we'd have our purses when we'd go into class, drop it on the floor by the desk. It's wide open. Teacher walks by and she's got 3 or 4 key cards to a motel and she's 15. I'm going to need you to start asking questions, because a 15-year-old can't rent a room.
Yeah, no, that's one of the things with the, I think, was it the Mavericks girl, where they said there's so many people that could have brought this to their attention when an older man and a young girl goes to rent a room in a motel, and then there's people coming in and out of that room. That's a huge red flag. It's very bizarre that nobody, I think, eventually, is that how they caught the guy? I can't remember, but
yeah. That's, and like I said, it's that whole mind your own business world that we live in.
Is there any,
so,
well, and is there any correlation with the homelessness and the fentanyl? Because I know here in Phoenix, that's a big thing. I had a guy on who he's like a YouTuber, and he interviews a lot of the kids out on the street that are homeless, and almost all of them are addicted to fentanyl. Is that is there a correlation between that and sex trafficking?
Yeah, because again, that's going to be, they're homeless, they're addicted to fentanyl, and that's how they're going to pay for it. And I've had recently several of our girls that have come to R.I.S.E. Fentanyl has been part of their story when it wasn't. I mean, even just 4 years ago when we opened in 2018. I mean, like, somebody called me and say, yeah, she's been on the run for 3 weeks. We found her in Target on Tuesday. She was high on fentanyl. Like, okay. And like I said, February 2018, when I opened up, I never heard the term fentanyl.
Yeah, and I never heard this guy that I had on. He kind of educated me about blues and smoking blues. I was like, "What are blues?" I guess they're these little blue pills of fentanyl. That's what the street name is. I didn't even know what that was.
Right. And see, and like, for instance, I had one young lady who, when you get into her stories, well, my mom actually started me on fentanyl when I was 12.
Oh my God.
I'm like, okay, great. So clearly, we're not going to be working with mom. I'm so yeah. And again, yeah. Um, and that's what, kids go to parties and they're all trading various prescriptions and trying them out. And, kids literally think nothing for, I mean, I've heard of kids going to parties where, somebody's having a party because parents are out of town for the weekend and everybody decides it might be cool to start experimenting sexually, whether they're trading boyfriends and girlfriends or trying out same sex relationships for the first time or whatever. And then here's the thing with when we know, teenagers' brains aren't completely developed. Well, then they meet somebody who starts asking them to do something for money. They're like, I've already done it all for free, may as well get paid. And that can't be worse than all these things I've already done.
Yeah. And then it's just this downward spiral where they just, yeah. I mean, and it seems like it always starts out with something. I heard this lady tell her story. She was an adult, but it was a thing where she had this boyfriend and he would just plant little seeds. And I think that's the grooming process. Like, oh, I know this girl that she got made, $500 a night stripping. And like the girlfriend was kind of like, oh, that's weird. And then like, as like time went on and then they had money problems, then it was like the seeds are already planted. And then it was just like this downward spiral. It was really strange.
Yeah. And then, like I said, and then they can't get out of it.
Right.
They can't see a way out of it. And like I said, in particular with adults, because of having to prove that force, fraud, or coercion, which is difficult from an adult perspective, what they wind up with is being arrested over and over and over again for solicitation or prostitution. And they have this terrible record that then follows them for the rest of their lives, and they can't get legitimate work.
Yeah.
And, for as much as they, and maybe they find themselves out of the life several times, but then because of their criminal record as an adult, they can't get a job to support themselves. And so they just fall back on this is because it's what they know.
Mm. Yeah,
right?
that's terrible. Well, hopefully that's something that we can change if we shed a light on this. And, I think people can change. I think people can do amazing things. So I don't think that should be something that should be held against them.
Yeah,
what about with religious cults? And is that a common thing, or is that kind of rare with the sex trafficking there? Like we just watched the Netflix documentary, Keep Sweet, Pray and Obey, because it takes place a few hours from here in Arizona. That cult was there. And I mean, it was just disturbing to hear about that. But is that more of a rare thing, or do you see some of that?
I have not ever seen any of that. We do know the stories about some of the religious cults and fanatics and things where they take multiple wives, and some of them are very young. Mm-hmm. But as far as then like turning them out on the street and being publicly traded, I've not heard of that.
Okay.
What I've heard of it has always been within, just within that cult. Not that it's any better, but
right. Okay. Kind of a different thing. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, what about with these conspiracies? Like, how high up do these trafficking rings go? Because again, when I see these like 6 people involved, 8 people involved, I mean, do you think there's like another Jeffrey Epstein out there right now that just hasn't been caught?
Oh, I believe it 100%.
That's some scary stuff.
And I try not to be a conspiracy theorist, but I'm telling you, when you start following the money and you start following some of these other things, and I mean, and then, like I said, and just knowing that the people who sell and the people who buy are from all walks of life and all professions and all of these kinds of things, it isn't far-fetched to me to believe that there, is a network and layers upon layers upon layers. And if we ever knew the truth of how high up it would go, we would all just be amazed.
Well, yeah, because they're probably having some of these guys take the fall for them that are the lower level people, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and then there's
money is a powerful thing. It's a powerful motivator.
Yeah.
And people are willing to do whatever it takes to keep having that money come in. And
Well, yeah, and it seems like, again, not to get too much on this conspiracy thing, but I don't think they released the list of people that went to the Epstein Island. Like, that's another thing that's really kind of disturbing to me, is that these people are not being. I know they went after Ghislaine Maxwell or whatever, but what about all the people that visited the island that had sex with the minors? Are they not being arrested too? It seems.
well, not so far, like I said. And we hear talk about, maybe she's going to release her quote unquote black book or her customer list. Maybe she's not. I don't know. That's up for debate, and whether or not she's trying to make deals about that so that her consequences are lesser if she's willing to give names and those kinds of things. And like, your consequences don't need to be lesser, and I still need the names.
Yeah, it seems like they should be able to find it if they. I mean, I'm sure they have a warrant by now, and they've been able to look. And they really hit it that well that the FBI can't find it, or DEA, whoever is in charge of this.
I don't know that they necessarily haven't found it. I just think that perhaps some of the names are of folks that are so powerful that they're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah, that's some scary stuff. And I mean, obviously, there's a lot of problems with the justice system in this. And I heard one of the things is the long wait between the arrests and the trial for the traffickers, and then that the victim has to kind of relive it. Mm-hmm. Like, how many victims just drop out because they don't want to testify and relive all this stuff?
A lot. And not having the testimony of the victim, because there's all of the legal mumbo jumbo of corroboration and things like that. When you don't have the testimony of the person that it actually was happening to, it can make a case very hard to prosecute. And so what we see a lot are cases pleading out to some lesser charges to avoid that additional trauma to the victims, or because victims don't want to testify and be cooperative with that part. Because, I have listened to and heard a number of victims who are adults speak and tell their story, whether it's at a conference or whatever. And, when you get to talking to them, they'll tell you that, especially when they were a lot closer in time to their trafficking happening, that the first time that they told their story in public, that, they would go home or wherever and, be in a fetal position of, PTSD or just anxiety and depression and fear and all of those things from telling their story in public, and the reliving that they're having to do just to explain to you and to tell you, here's what happened to me, and here's why you need to know this is going on. Mm-hmm. And so then you put them in the adversarial setting of a courtroom with the idea that, anything can happen, no matter how good the evidence is, someone still may not be found guilty or whatever. And that whole thought process going along with and I have to sit right in front of him or her, because traffickers can be women, mm-hmm. And have to say all of these things that I'm so ashamed of. It's a really hard sell sometimes to get someone to say, yeah, I'm gonna go through that process, even though with every fiber of their being, they want this person to be held accountable and not be able to do this to anybody else.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know could we change the law so that they could just testify on a video or something? Because that does seem very skewed in the abuser's favor.
Well, and all of the states have the availability of closed circuit TV for some testimony and things like that in sex cases, but it requires motions to be filed and parties to be in agreement and a judge to allow it and all of those things. And that we have had a couple of Supreme Court rulings that have come down with regard to being able to face your accuser, that have made some of that a little bit more difficult to do in certain cases, in certain situations, because of the confrontation clause and that the constitutional right to that. But there are some options like that can be used. And I think a lot of prosecutors, use it as much as they possibly can, but sometimes it just isn't allowed in whatever court for whatever reason. And so,
Okay. Well, let's educate the people about the red flag. So we talked about some of them, like you said, the fancy purses, the motel key cards, some other ones. And again, these are not, if a person has one of these doesn't mean they're necessarily, but it's just good thing it's a red flag for sure. Like person seems overly fearful, submissive, tense, or paranoid. And this is an interesting one. Person is deferring to another person before giving information.
right. So that certainly you're going to see maybe in a healthcare setting, like in an emergency room. Somebody comes in and they have an injury. Again, some of the dynamics too are going to be very akin to what we expect to see, say, in a domestic violence victim. So we're going to get weird and out there explanations for injuries or explanations for injuries that don't correspond with the injury itself or just don't make sense, right? Or so they're in an emergency room and in the context girls with a guy and the guy's doing all the talking, answering all the questions, even the history questions, the health history questions that she should be doing all the answering. Or, she does look at him or defer to him before she gives an answer, those kinds of things. You are going to see that. I know one of our young ladies actually helped me. I did a presentation for and conference for paramedics and EMTs. And I was like, okay, so what do you want these folks to know? What do you want them to be looking for? And she said, well, first of all, they need to be really cognizant of where they're being called out to, right? Are you being called out to a seedy motel? Are you being called out to an address and it's an abandoned house, but this girl claims this is where she lives? Pay attention again to what is she wearing when you get called out as a paramedic. Is she only wearing underwear? Or is she very clearly 14, 15 years old and that lingerie is clearly meant for an adult woman? Those kinds of things. And again, what explanation is she giving you for injuries? And I know she talked about too, even sometimes bruises and injuries not being covered up, whether it's marks around the neck from being choked or other things like that. She said, because the particular pimp that she had would not make sure always that injuries were covered up because he needed that to be assigned to his other girls.
Oh.
That when you don't do what you're supposed to, this is what happens.
Wow.
Right. So that was one of the things too. She says, like, even pay attention to those injuries that are visible.
No, that makes sense.
Not just the ones that aren't.
Right. So your behavior, clothing, inappropriately sexual or inappropriate for weather, the girl's overly sexual, minor is unaccompanied at night or falters in giving an explanation of who they are with and what they're doing. What is it? This one says identification documents are held by, so like if somebody else has their ID and stuff, that would be a sign.
Right. So like we were talking earlier for the folks who are maybe here from another country and the folks are holding on to their documents and identification until their debt's paid off. Again, or for, someone who is an American, they should have a hold of all of those themselves, but their explanation is, well, I don't have that because somebody else does, or,
Yeah. And multiple phones or multiple social media accounts can also be a sign, a red flag.
We have had a number of girls who that is how their trafficking was actually discovered, is that they had phones that they couldn't explain. And mom and dad didn't get it for them. And so when somebody wants to start looking at their phone, they lose their absolute ever-loving mind about people looking at this phone. And so an unexplained phone, or just a phone where somebody is absolutely gonna completely falling apart at the thought of you going through it. That's how a number of our girls their trafficking has been discovered.
So if parents check their kids' phones, I know that kids probably don't want to hear that. Sorry, kids, but parents got to be parents and do the parenting job. And I know there's like programs and things that I think I heard you or somebody talking about a program that you could put on the kid's phone where if words like sex or things like that, it'll notify the parents. What was it? Was it called like Damsel in Distress or something like that?
Yeah,
Or what was it?
Damsel in Distress is a direct sales company that sells self protection stuff to women, and they
Okay.
actually have an app that you
Yeah.
can subscribe to that will notify parents. But some of the cell phone companies have some parental controls that you can subscribe to now that do the same thing. There is actually a couple of phone companies. One is called Gabb Wireless, that is
Okay.
very specifically made for kids, where you can't even put the internet and social media apps on it, and
Love
then
it.
and that you have to actually pay extra to allow your kids to be able to receive photos in their text messages. Like,
Okay.
they can literally make phone calls and get phone calls, and they can send texts, but words only, unless you pay the extra monthly fee for them to be able to do group texts or photos. So it's massively controlled cell phones. So there are a number of those. And then we too, there is certainly on Facebook, there is a group called Protect Young Eyes that is really great. They keep up with a lot of the apps that are coming out and websites, and are really good to provide educational materials for parents. And then I will regularly, even on our Facebook page, share graphics that say, hey, these apps, if your kid's got them and you want your kid to keep having them, cool, but you really need to keep track of what's happening there. And then if you can live with your kid without letting them have those apps, that's even better. Just because the apps and the internet is terrible.
Yeah. So that's great. I'll put some of those links in the show notes. What other big scale type solutions, if you had a magic wand, like, is there certain laws that you would change? Like, I mean, I feel like I don't know, maybe the Backpages, again, we kind of talked about that. Maybe there's some pros to having that be out in the open. Maybe laws at the border, more home visits by social workers. Like, I don't know, like what kinds of laws could we do or solutions to this problem? I mean, I guess a big thing to me, I feel like, is awareness. I feel like a lot of people don't even know this is going on.
Yeah, awareness and education always is that first step. But I think that we need to be a lot better in our country, and a lot harder on the people who are actually buying sex.
Okay. Yeah. Cause what is the punishment for that? I thought I saw one thing where they put the guy away for 14 years. That was the John or the customer, whatever you call it.
And we are getting better about that. But in a lot of places, again, if we don't have a lot of cooperation from victims, it's going to wind up being a misdemeanor solicitation charge or pandering. And
Really?
I'm like, listen, if a police officer busts up into the Motel 6 room and dude's there and the girl's 14, I'm going to need a whole lot more than a misdemeanor pandering charge.
That's it. That's only a misdemeanor for 14-year-old solicitation.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it can vary from state to state, but I mean, like I said, if you don't have cooperation from your victim, there's all different ins and outs of how someone can get that down to a misdemeanor. But I mean, there are a lot of places where what's being pursued against those people who purchase is going to be pandering or solicitation. And I'm like, I just, that's not enough.
So cracking down and tougher laws will put some of these people away. So, because if they're a misdemeanor, then they're going to get out and then they're going to do it again.
Right.
So is it a lot of repeat offenders?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have the states have laws on the books that don't allow minor victims to be charged with like prostitution, and a lot of states that won't let you pursue charges against minors if the crime arose out of their trafficking. So like they can't be charged with the recruiting piece, or because there are some other crimes, robbery and things like that can actually arise out of trafficking. So that if it arises out of that and they're minors, you can't let them do that. But I think that there needs to be some changes in the laws, excuse me, with regard to adults as well. because I'm a woman, and I'm here to tell you, I've never gotten up one morning and said to myself, you know what, I think that my career choice is going to be one that requires me to have sex with strangers who may or may not beat the crap out of me, hold guns to my head, knives to my throat, where I'm going to be arrested regularly, have this terrible criminal record, and this stigma. I mean, it's not a choice, even if you're an adult.
Yeah, it
There's
sounds
been things,
awful.
yeah, there's been things that have gone on in that man or woman's life up to this point that have put them in a position to believe that the only way that they have to support themselves is this.
Right.
And so I think that we need to look at our laws with regard to the criminal records we're giving to adults that are part of this world as well.
Okay, that's a great, yeah, I like all that stuff. So now tell me about more specifically about R.I.S.E. I know you have housing for, is it 7 people or 9, or it was soon to be 9?
Soon to be 9, but it's 7 right now. Mm-hmm. And so R.I.S.E. stands for Restoring Identities After Sexual Exploitation. And we're a treatment home, a long-term treatment home for teen girls. That's currently, in a perfect world, if I had all the money in the world, I would love to have a campus that was for victims for boys.
Oh, yeah.
Because we only have a few locations in the country that actually provide services for boys.
Really?
But because the overwhelming majority of victims are girls, that's who we focus on. And we take girls as young as 12. They can stay with us past 18, but under our licensing in Oklahoma, they have to admit to R.I.S.E. before their 18th birthday, but then they can stay past that.
How long can they stay past? It just depends.
That's really kind of up to us and them, as they're still in services. But we, like I said, we provide comprehensive services to the girls. Like I said, they live here and they go to the public school here. It's online and all virtual in-house. That's for their safety and confidentiality, but they are enrolled students in our public school here. For the girls, that makes sense. Everything is individualized. So, we have some girls that come that, based on their age and how far behind they are in school, a GED makes more sense. So if that makes more sense for a young lady rather than working on traditional high school diploma, then we're going to work on that as well. So they get individual counseling, group counseling, family therapy for those whose families are supportive and are going to be a part of that. We do tons of life skills groups and job skills groups. We have the electronic infant simulators. And so all of our girls have to be parents for a while. And we do a sex education week every quarter. And believe it or not, the girls actually learn things that for as much as they've experienced, they don't know. Like, we go out and we buy all the fruits and vegetables and they learn how to put on condoms. Most of them don't know how to do that. We talk about pregnancy. We talk about sexually transmitted diseases, all of those kinds of things. Birth control, all of those kinds of things when we do that week. But lots of life skills groups. And then we do a lot of just normalization, recreation. Let's be a regular kid. So we're going to go swimming. We're going to go roller skating. We're going to go to the movies. I have one staff that this is totally her wheelhouse. She has a couple of younger daughters at home. And so she seems like she's always the one who does this. They put on their own beauty pageant and they do, they'll do celebrity lookalike stuff where they'll pull up pictures online of celebrities they like. And then they'll all sit around and do each other's hair and makeup and to try and look like that picture or, but we do lots of things in the community too. For that, we have a historical theater in our downtown, and they do a camp every summer for a week where the girls focus on dancing and acting and singing. And so we've had a couple of girls go do that, and then they put on a show at the end of the week. And then we do lots and lots and lots of community service and give back stuff. So we have a large veterans hospital here in our town. So the girls will make cards for the veterans that are there. They make baked goods and take them to the police department, and they go hang out with residents at nursing homes, and just all kinds of stuff like that.
Wow.
They've served lunch at the local homeless shelter. Yeah. So,
Wow, that sounds like all great stuff. I love all this. My concern would be with this place. Now, is this a hidden location, or do you have security? Because I would be scared of some of these traffickers getting angry and coming back and trying to find the girls.
right. So we do not disclose our street address. It's not published anywhere. We
Okay.
we have, like, when you're on our website, it says PO box, whatever. And I'll have people say, so you're located in this town where our PO box is. And I'm actually like, no, actually, no, I'm not. But I did that on purpose. Right. So our PO box isn't even in the same town where,
perfect.
where the house actually is.
Okay.
And we do have, we have secured doors. People can't just walk in. Like, they have key codes, and my staff have to put in a code to get in. And we have a security gate where, again, when visitors come for whatever reason, they pull up to the gate, and they have to call a phone number to be buzzed in.
Okay.
And then, like I said, then they get to the front door, and they still someone has to go let them into the building, even if they're already on campus. And we just don't have a ton of visitors either. Every visitor is cleared by me. And if, and there's confidentiality agreements. Like, I don't even interview for staff to work here on site. Like, I make them meet me at a local coffee shop, and I do an interview to hire somebody on site. And they do not come on campus to be a staff member until I've had the interview process, that I've done the background and fingerprinting check process, and I've said, yes, you work here now.
How many staff members do you have?
We have, when you count me, we have 11.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big staff.
Yeah.
So can people, I always end each episode with a charity. Can people donate to this as a nonprofit, or is there another charity that you recommend people give to?
Yes, we are 100% nonprofit 501c3.
Okay.
Every dollar that we have goes to
perfect
providing the services and letting the girls live here.
Okay. So if people want to help this cause, they can donate to you, because you're doing the Lord's work over there. I mean, it's amazing. I love it. I love what you're doing. And hopefully, again, like I said, we've kind of shed a light on this for some people. And I hope this issue gets more publicity. I don't understand why it doesn't, but I'll do my part, with my tiny little podcast here. So hopefully this informs some people and educates.
Yeah, I hope so. And like I said, what I have found is that trafficking, sometimes I refer to it as the topic du jour, or the social issue du jour, because it seems like it kind of goes in waves where there's a lot of awareness, and it's every cable news channel is running some sort of 1 hour special, or there's tons of made for TV movies or whatever about it, and then it kind of drops off, and people forget. And then something happens like Jeffrey Epstein, and then everybody's talking about it again. And then it kind of drops, because nobody wants to talk about people having sex with our kids.
It's disturbing. It's massively disturbing. And it's massively disturbing on how common it is. And like we said before, like how there's multiple people involved, and we don't know how far these things go up. And I mean, it's really, I feel like there needs to be a bigger crackdown. I mean, you said, the making the laws stricter. I agree with that, but I also think there needs to be more investigation into this stuff, and more law enforcement teams dedicated to this issue.
Yeah. It's, and we have law enforcement agencies here that have specific divisions that are just the trafficking unit. But then, smaller places there, or, folks that just don't have as many resources, perhaps maybe it's their vice unit that already exists. That's going to do a lot of that. But yeah, we need a lot more. And it seems like, like I said, in our current climate, it's one of many things in the basket, and it's not the one that's getting the most attention compared to everything else.
Right. Well, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of problems in the world, but geez, this one to me is it's got to be towards the top of the list, if not the number one issue that needs to be solved, or maybe not solved completely, but geez, improvements and cracking down on some of this stuff, and changing some laws. And raising awareness is huge too. So, well, thank you so much for doing this. Anything else I missed or anything else you want to bring up?
No, like I said, anybody wants to support us, they can always check out our website. It's just riseshelter.org. And my email address is listed there, and anybody can reach out to me anytime.
Okay.
I think even my personal cell phone number may actually even be on there too. And like I said, I can't ever get away from my phone. So if anybody has any questions or wants to help in any way, they can just get on there and reach out to me, and be happy to chat with them anytime.
Okay. I'll put that in the show notes too, so people can just click the link.
All right. Thank you so
much. All right. Bye-bye. Okay. Thank you again to Keri Spencer from R.I.S.E for all the work that she's doing. The link to her organization is in the show notes, along with the links for getting help. If you want to make a difference, you can donate to Keri's organization, R.I.S.E, or even just sharing this episode and helping spread the word and educate people on the problem is helpful too. Thank you so much for listening or watching. Make sure to subscribe to the show so you'll be updated on future episodes. Have a great rest of your day and shoot for the moon.